Right, real champion. All right, so let's just walk through a very simple little model. This is a little toy model, which turns out to produce results that are, actually gets hard numbers out, which are surprisingly good. Sometimes we make toy models, and we'll talk about a number of examples we go through. And I kind of would like to have a great set of slides on this. We're just sort of touching on them. I don't know if you've heard this term, toy model. It's a bit of a physics term. Yes, you agree? It's a physics-y kind of thing to say? No? Toy model is just a simple, really simple, bare bones model. It has 2 or 3 ingredients. Very easy to explain. And maybe you have to simulate it, but maybe it's like a little, like cellular automata, if you've seen those sorts of things, or like this will be. Maybe you can derive things mathematically, but it's very simply framed. So you can see what are the ingredients and what changing them, if you've maybe 2 parameters, what changing them means, there's some sense to them. And there's something measurable about the outcome. And you get some emergent behavior. You get something interesting coming in. What the great power of toy models is, I think, is to move us away from what we might intuit about systems in particular, because we're pretty bad about thinking about groups and how they behave, collective things. It's just hard. We're good at individual narratives, and we tend to impose them on all sorts of systems. Come back to that. Anyway, so this is a kind of a toy model. It's not necessarily meant to, it's not like fluid mechanics and here are the Navier-Stokes equations and we're going to model how stuff flows around a plane or a ship with a lot of pain. But, in principle, we're going to do the right thing through a pipe. It's a toy model. But having said that, as I said, it will have a lot of payoff. So that's always a spectacular achievement. So it does say elephant, and it's because I accidentally said elephant instead of element. So I'm just going to sort of try to say one of these words. But the idea is it's an element, it's got a particular flavor at t equals 1. So you can think of different things. It could be the first person in a city, right? So there's no one in this land, and someone moves in and says this is going to be a city, right? And so that city has a flavor. They put on a T-shirt that says this is my city. All right. Or it could be a book. This is a terrible way to write a book, right? It could be the first word in a book, like call, right? Which book is that? Yes, right. Okay, so that's pretty fantastic, right? So, which is, right? No one's read it though, right? Because it's... I read like the first chapter. It is itself, and this is a Colbert joke, it is a metaphor for suffering. Reading Moby Dick is a metaphor for Moby Dick. All right, so you learn a lot about whales every second chapter. So, okay, time 2, 3, 4. We're just going to have this little clock. Very, very simple. You can see, I'm sure you can think of all these sorts of ways to elaborate this, but we'll just keep it in this little box. We're going to add a new elephant, and it's going to have a different flavor. We'll think of colored elephants, right? Different chartreuse elephants and all sorts of things. So we're going to add a new one, and it could be a new word, or it could be we create a new city, or we're going to add a new elephant. So there's going to be something about the cities versus the individuals, and we have to get that right. So with probably row, it's going to be a new elephant with a new flavor. That'll be a new city, right? We're going to put our person in a new city. Or it's going to be a new word that we haven't seen before, right? So me. And with probably 1 minus row, you choose something that already exists. Just randomly choose something that exists in your little population. And we've got them all ordered because there's time 1, 2, 3, 4. They're just sitting there. I know I'm sort of talking about cities in space, but we're just making a line of things. And it could be just little colors, right? That's all you can do. You just color the first box. There could be boxes. Color the first box yellow. And with probably row, let's say it's, this is typically low. We'll just make the next box a different color. We have all these other colors over here. With probably 1 minus row, we will just choose randomly from all the colors we have and just copy it and put it in the next one. So at the very start, if we did this with Moby Dick, it's not a good way to do it. We'd write call, and then we write call again, because we only have one to choose from. Right, there are 2, this little algorithm branches here. If we're going to copy one that we had before, we just copy that. But with probably row, you would create a new one, right? So call, it could be banana, right? You're just reaching into a bag of words and you're putting it. So this is not how things work, right? When you write a book. Okay. So we can see there are some problems. It is a toy model, right? But you could think maybe, though, this is about how language grows, right? You start saying ook, 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 and that's helpful, and then you differentiate a little bit, right? So, and it does seem to work well for, say, the growth of the web, and right. So, yeah, in more detail. So, if you have the same flavor, so right, then that's a group. So you take all the chartreuse elephants and you can put them together. They're all on a line, but then we could say, okay, there's all the chartreuse ones, and then here are all the yellow ones, and all the words would be the same thing, right? So all of these form a group, all the ofs form a group, right? All the chickens form a group, right? All the words. And then same with cities. So we have all these people in cities, and they're naturally a group structure. But if you start to think about, so let's take the US right now, you choose a person at random, and let's say we're only talking about cities, you choose a person in a city, however that's defined, and then you just put another person in that city. That's how this mechanism would work. So it's like a migration thing. You add a new person. So that has actually some sort of appeal, and again, just a toy model, but you can imagine immigration, people know, they may know someone, bigger cities are more attractive in a sense, there's more of a chance for them to know someone in New York or wherever, and so, right. Chain migration is built into this thing. Okay, so this is a mutation innovation kind of field, right? That's all it is. We're making a new thing in our system. And this is replication imitation. We're copying and copying. So this has a nice evolutionary, like really pared down version of an evolutionary system. Seems okay? So that's it. That's it, right? That's the model, which somehow will produce gamma functions. But it's pretty easy to simulate, right? So you can just, so for a simulation, you could just say the flavors are just numbers. Right, so you're going to have some nice long vector, and depending on your system, you could just make your vector grow, or you could specify that it's of length 10,000. We're going to make the first 10,000 flavors, but you could just say, all right, the first flavor is 0. Right, we're just going to use numbers built in, just integers. The first flavor is 0, and then you go to the you have your little probabilities. We're going to fix this, right? So let's say it's 0.05. So 0.05. Is the chance that we create a new one. So you roll your little funny die, or you flip your coin that has a 0.05 chance of mutation and a 0.95 chance of copying. And if it's a mutation, then you just put a 1 in your next box. So there's a 0 here, 1 in your next box. And then if you then say, oh, I need to copy something from before, then you choose randomly from these first 2 and then put it in the next box. And so you end up with a string of numbers, and it will start off with 0s, and then some 1s, and then eventually a 2. But you still get lots of 0s and 1s, right? Because you're still copying them. And now and then you'll get a new one, which will be a 3. So it's going to have that feel to it. And then you just make a histogram of all the numbers. So the first one gets and if this is really low, right? If this is 0.001, right, 1,000th, then it's going to take about 1,000 steps before you actually before you mutate. So the first ones are all going to be 0s, and then you sort of, somewhere in there you'll go, boop, and you'll get a 1. So it'll be all these 0s and then a 1. And then still, if you're still copying, right, this is going to be a lot of 0s. Maybe you'll copy that 1 and so on. It'll take a little while. Eventually you get a 2, so you start to, but it is a Ponzi scheme kind of thing, right? I don't know if I've got that right. But the early ones in the system get copied much, right? They get this chance to grow and become more prevalent and get more copied. So you can see it has this, it's a rich get richer situation. Okay, so words appearing in language, right? So as I said, this is the Moby Dick thing, right? So, right, this is just writing out what we had. So rows, the next word has not appeared. And 1 minus row, it has, and we just copy. And again, we have these 2 things. So it turns out, obviously this is not how you write things, but there's also an extra piece. If you work your way through a book, any text, then the number of unique words that you've seen grows as a scaling, it rolls over. If we did it like this, it would grow linearly, because there's this rate essentially of new words appearing. It would just grow linearly, which is a bit, obviously it's odd. So there is this heaps law, it's called heaps law for that thing. Okay, I have it. Which sounds like it's heaps good, but it's named after heap. I really don't think we should name things after people, but maybe you differ on that because you want to have something named after you, but I think it is silly. I think we should name it after what it is. The normal distribution versus Gauss, great for Gauss, but usually you find out they were a terrible person at some point, and it's all very embarrassing too. So So we could use it like that. This is it's a terrible way to write a novel. Right. Just to sort of draw, there's one picture here maybe to help you one last step. So we've got 21 words have appeared in our novel. They are actually in sequence. But the way this mechanism works is we don't care about the sequence, right, at this point, because the next word is going to be a new word with probably row, and then with probably 1 minus row, we would choose from the words that exist. And so we go from, and here's the really nice thing, it's a random selection. And that's an easy mechanism, right? You just reach into your box of words and pull one out. That has a nice, simple feel to it. There's no, right, you don't need to know anything about it. I mean, you need to have them all at your disposal, but you don't need to be able to sort of do anything clever in that selection. So this is a very important detail. But because what it means is you just randomly select this ook, right? You don't select this group. But the consequence is that you effectively are selecting this group and adding a new ook to it. Fair enough, right? So we're not selecting by groups. That's a more difficult thing. So if we wanted to select by groups, right? So here are the 6 on 20. So there's a 6 on 21 chance that you get ook, 4 on 20 for thee, and a 1 in 21 you get library. If we wanted to choose from this distribution, right? We'd need to have this little table, and then we'd have to construct a special little funny die, which has 8 sides to it, and they've got some it's weighted in a weird way, right? We'd have to know a lot more, right? That would be harder to do. So this is very dopey, right? We just go in, and these could be all mixed up. I've grouped them here, but they could be all mixed up in a big soup. And so this, and I'll have the thing. This can be done with a bag, right? So you can have this big infinite supply of different colored balls over here, and you put one ball in. You just choose one of these, and you put it in. They're all different colors, right? You put one in, and then you flip your funny coin. And if it's like, get a new one, then you go over to your thing and you grab a new one of color that's never been seen before, and you throw it into your bag. But if it's not, right, if it's a replication thing, you reach in the bag, rummage around, pick one out, look at it, go and get another one of it, and put both of them back in. So this is it's a version of the all these earn models, right? There are lots of constructions like this. The urn, you're supposed to have this little urn with balls in it, right? And you could maybe have 3 of them, and they have different colors, and there's lots of nice little problems, like if you're pulling them out and replicating them and so on. So it's a variation of this. You have an infinite supply of balls over here. Yeah?
Does row always change with time?
Okay, so you can make row change with time, but it turns out to not, the toy model works fantastically and interestingly with not doing that. But if you wanted to make something that had a bit more of a feel like a book, you would have row change, right? So row would be 1 early on, lots of different things, and then would taper off. It would drop down to a low innovation rate. Right. So you could look at a real thing and find out how its row dynamics are. Typically, eventually, it becomes fairly flat for a lot of systems. They have to keep growing. They have to be evolving. There's been some papers recently, and we have one that really goes against one of them, which was that, well, maybe it's true, that English is cooling off, for example, right? And I think they had English, maybe Spanish, and Hebrew. Hebrew was interesting because of it becomes a strong language again, so it has a spike, and you can see that. But words don't seem to really entirely die. If you look at, so there's somewhere, right? People are still using them somewhere, even just to say this is an old word. And that seems to be true of technology too. There's usually someone making some bizarre thing that the Greeks made just for fun. It's not wide-scale production, but you can, yeah. Which is interesting. So they become very rare, but Okay. This is a little Pratchett thing, of course. But anyway, all right. So fundamental rich get richer story, that's what it is, and I like to call it rich get richer. So now we have competition, right? So that's built into this. There's a competition, right? So if ook does well for itself here, that's at the expense of everyone else. It's going to be more prominent in the next time step, more of a chance of being replicated.